Hey, everybody out there, it's Rob Roberts from the Voice Geeks Network, and I am joined today by Bobby Blackwolf, also with the Voice Geeks Network.
That's right. How you all doing tonight?
It is both of our Sunday night shows live
It
represented
is.
here tonight, and if Bobby and myself are getting together, it's for one of two reasons. We're either here to talk about video games, or we're probably talking about DragonCon again. And the second one is true tonight. Maybe a little bit of the first one, but the second one is very true tonight. The app for DragonCon went live.
Yes.
It seems like it's a little later this year. It seemed like it was a little late this year to you, Bobby?
Yes, for very good reason.
Yes, we'll get into that. But we are going to talk about DragonCon 2023, give a little preview of what to look forward to this year. My 10th DragonCon in person, Bobby's 47th. How many?
Yeah, I don't know because I didn't go every year.
Oh, okay.
I know my first year was 1996.
Wow.
Was my first year. I didn't go every year in the 90s, and I think and there were a couple times in the early 2000s I probably didn't go, but I probably
And I don't count 2020 either.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there was a time I was going to PAX, which was Labor Day weekend, but I would still come to DragonCon on the final day on Monday.
All right.
So I don't know if I really count those or not because I wasn't there the whole weekend. So, but since '96, I've been going.
Well, I like to usually start off these videos here at VOGNetwork kind of with the TLDR first. So for those that don't have the attention span to watch us talk for an hour about this, which I completely understand, what would you say, Bobby, are like the things that you are most looking forward to about DragonCon and just getting to do this all over? Let's do the DragonCon again.
I mean, the main thing is like the thing about DragonCon is that it's 36 conventions in one, and so I never have the same experience every year. And so with all the different fan tracks, there's a whole bunch of different things going on, and you get to do a whole lot of different things. So if you don't care about sci-fi but you like science, well, there's astronauts there. You know, you can talk to them. So it's really about just the different type of experiences that you can have. Other people go because it's a big party. I don't do the partying thing anymore, but for a lot of people, it is the biggest party of the year.
I like some of the I like the 8-bit bash and the open casket party was a really cool one last year, and Spectrum, I got to represent my peeps, and all that. So like I do like some of those big parties, but I get it. Like sometimes when you say party, I also think about the room parties.
I mean, like basically the floor, basically the lobbies.
Oh yeah.
All the lobby parties. That's the big party that a lot of people think of.
I get it. Yeah. I thought maybe you were talking about the room parties and the shots until, fireball shots until 4 a.m. Or whenever the DragonCon late show comes on and the sun's rising and all of that. Yep. So yeah. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about this, because something that's very interesting about this year is the fact that, DragonCon gets celebrity guests, right? It gets a lot of big names, but this year we have a big strike going on in Hollywood between the Writers Guild and, notably for DragonCon purposes, the Actors Guild, Screen Actors Guild, and that. And I want to be very clear. I do support the strikes. I don't believe actors should be replaced with AI, and I believe the things that they're asking for, we're not talking about your multi-million-dollar actors and their deals here. We're talking about those that are working at scale, and they need to get their fair pay and residuals and all that. So I want to be very clear. I do support the strike. However, it's going to be interesting that these panels this year are going to be very altered in content because of what's going on, right?
Yeah, and that ties into the comment you made earlier about, things came out differently later this year than they usually did. And that's absolutely true because from what I understand, DragonCon had a plan A and a plan B for their schedule. Plan A was DragonCon as normal. And plan B is none of our TV and movie stars can talk about their TV and movie projects. And they waited until basically the very last minute, and they pulled the lever for plan B, released the schedule yesterday, as of when we were recording this yesterday. It's all basically, if there are actors on panels, they're not talking about their work.
Yeah.
Their specific work, they're talking about their methodology, or they're talking about something different. Or they've just been completely replaced with fan panels about the universe and things like that.
Yeah. It's very interesting to see some ballroom panels, the big spaces, but they're essentially fan tracks, which is fine because, DragonCon is about the fans. I'll be interested to see if they pull, big numbers for these types of things and what happens with all that.
Yeah.
So, but it's going to be interesting. But for the celebrity ones, which, if you kind of read the program, they have some very tongue in cheek ways of describing them, which I think are funny. Like it's, things like maybe they'll talk about what they ate for breakfast. Maybe they won't.
Yeah.
It's like, it's really funny. But like, okay, another like nerd thing I've done for a couple of years now is the Star Trek cruise, right? I've talked about that at the Voice Geeks Network and my adventures on that. And we do get to see that because it's a 7-day cruise. There's really only so much Star Trek, let's be honest. I think those actors want to talk about at some point. And I feel like the cruise production that puts that whole thing on together allows them the space to do these panels on other things that they're passionate about. So for example, when I went this last year, John Delancey, who did Q, directed a production of The Lost World, the stage play, which a lot of it ties into Jurassic Park, but not really. The sequel was named after the play. But anyway, I digress. There's that, but also like Max, who plays Quark on Deep Space Nine, is actually like a deep, like Shakespeare studied person. So he did a whole Shakespeare class and stuff about Shakespeare. And I think there were a lot of people that thought that was really, really cool that he was able to talk about those types of things. And that's what I think about when I think about what these panels might be like this year, is that you're going to hear about some of these celebrities' other passions. And I guess my point is, it might actually be a little more interesting. Again, I want to be very careful here because I want to make it clear. I want fans to hear about their TV shows, and I want the strike to be resolved. I want the studios to come to the table and give the actors a fair deal. But there's a weird silver lining here where I'm like, these panels this year could actually be really fascinating, more so than ever.
Yeah, no, you're going to get to know the stars a little bit more intimately, I think, because you're going to hear about their passions outside of acting. You're going to get to hear, because like some stars, like some of them, there's one that I know of, and I can't say the name here, but they started a podcast in 2020, and they are very passionate about their podcast. And I know the digital media track was trying to get this person to come on the digital media track just to talk about their podcast, because that won't violate anything about the strike.
Right.
And, doing programming like that, where you talk about their hobbies, maybe they've got a cause that they really enjoy. Maybe they're a big fan of baseball. I know, DragonCon and baseball don't really mix for some people, but maybe they want to talk about, baseball and their love of baseball and things like that. So I'm not saying that's something I haven't really gone through a lot of the main programming tracks, but like there's opportunities there that I don't think are going to happen just because there wasn't enough time to plan on DragonCon side. But you can get to know the celebrities a lot better than just what did you think about recording the scene when you were in all this makeup?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if, because I noticed that some of the, groupings, they're still grouping them by what they're famous for, right? Like I think we have Sean Astin and somebody else in that universe are doing like it's
Elijah
not a
Wood.
it's Elijah Wood. Okay, I couldn't remember who it was. Somebody else. And by the way, before I get corrected by the Trekkies, I mixed up my Ferengi earlier. It's Armin that plays Quark that was doing the. Sorry, I said Max. I is the other Ferengi. Anyway, before I get corrected, stop writing your comment. Okay, but
it's already been written.
I know it's already been written in post. I've already thumbs down it
already.
No, but I was gonna say it's interesting because they're still grouped by what they're famous for. Or for example, if we want to talk about Star Trek, we have a lot of folks from Strange New Worlds are coming. They're not talking about that, but it will be interesting to see like some of the organic friendships that have probably grown out of these things. Like I don't know, I kind of have an assumption that Sean Astin and Elijah Wood are probably kind of buddies after doing those movies for so long. Maybe they're not, but I think they are. But it would be interesting to kind of hear a little bit more about their friendship and what did they do, outside of just making movies. I think it's gonna be very interesting.
Yeah. So, but I mean, some actors are probably gonna, not want to do that. They don't want to like mess up, and also as we've seen, I mean, and an actor can kind of tank themselves a little bit, as we have seen at other conventions where there are actors who are like, I think it's crap, I can't talk about my stuff. I love my union, but I don't love this strike. And it made headlines.
Yeah, that's true.
In the nerd world just a couple weeks ago. So it is going to be a weird, interesting year. But I think there could be some gems that come out of it, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be interesting to see, because DragonCon TV, which is, notorious at the, convention for playing on the TVs, and they have TV Land that plays the
Mhm.
old panels. I'll be curious how many of the panels from this year end up in rotation a lot because they're going to be so different. I just really fascinated to see how it turns out.
That's and you actually just brought up a good point. Are
Mm.
they going to play the old celebrity panels on
Ooh.
DragonCon TV,
Oh, I
or
don't
are they going
know.
to stand in solidarity and not promote their work
Oh,
on
my.
DC TV Land?
Or is the one DragonCon TV panel I have that's in rotation when I did the Overwatch voice actors,
Yep.
that one's just gonna play on loop because video games are okay to talk about. So
Yep.
it's gonna be nonstop video game on track.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if it might also, in all seriousness, we have had discussions in the past where, okay, William Shatner is here, but he's mostly talking about his trip to the moon. So
Yeah.
or not the moon, but the trip to space.
Yeah.
Maybe I kind of
He
wish
thought
they
it
took
was
him
the
to the moon.
moon,
Maybe he
but
thought, you know
yeah.
what I mean? They took him up to space, that was a very life-changing experience for him. So I'm very
Yeah.
curious, maybe they have to kind of screen what they're going to put, or maybe they don't do TV Land this year. I don't know. It's going to be weird.
Yeah. I mean, they can always run other things. Also, remember, DragonCon has a whole digital fan track stuff.
True. Sure.
Every track had to submit, I think, 2 or 3 digital panels for the DragonCon at home, the virtual
Mm-hmm.
DragonCon that they still do, and they can run those
Mm.
on the second channel because they've got enough content for the whole weekend.
Well, that's a good point. Because
So
they did that last year, and I don't think we really saw that in the
yeah,
hotels. You saw it,
no,
yeah.
you had to be at home to see it.
Yeah.
But if we could see that in the hotels, then that way they could stand in solidarity with the strike
Ah.
and not play something that's promoting the work of somebody who's at the convention that's trying to adhere to the strike.
Ah, very interesting. I like that. I like the way you think there. So, yeah, and I do love that they still do the virtual. Not everybody's comfortable with,
Yeah.
this, it's still going to be, I think even though they're not selling tickets in person, you had to get them online and they
Yep.
still cap it at a certain amount. So we're not going to be looking at a year as quite as wild as 2019.
Right.
Let's be honest. I know I got COVID after last year's Dragon Con. It was a risk I took, and I thought because I had it earlier in the summer that I was likely not to get it again. And oops, but I realize there are people out there that cannot take that type of calculated risk
Yep.
for whatever reason. So I'm glad that Dragon Con still has something that they're offering so that
Hmm.
folks, are able to get in the spirit of things,
Yep.
even when, for whatever reason, they just aren't there to go in person yet. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I will also say that it's come to as a shock to some people about the tickets not being sold in person. Because I actually have a friend that he was like, yeah, no, I finally convinced my coworkers to go. They're going to go down to the parade. They're going to go buy a ticket and go in on Saturday. And I'm like, they don't sell them in person anymore. He's like, what are you talking about? They always like that. You always do. And I'm like, no, that you
Oh.
have to buy those daily passes online, and because they eliminated the on-site registration
Mm.
completely, and he didn't know. And he's been going to DragonCon for as long as I am. He's just not terminally online like we
Sure,
are,
sure.
so he doesn't know that stuff. And he just told his friends exactly what he's told people for 20 years.
Mhm, mhm. Do you think there's going to be, I mean, I guess we've already talked about kind of the big differences with, the strike and how that could affect some of the content. Do you think otherwise there's going to be any big changes versus last year at Dragon Con? Because I still feel like, okay, if you look at the post-COVID Dragon Cons, like 2020 obviously didn't happen. Which
Yeah.
to again sidestep a little bit, you talked about the plan A and the plan B. I feel like Dragon Con's been having to do this for the last 3 years. They've had a plan
Yeah.
A and a plan B. 2020, plan A, we can do it. Plan B, we can't. Force majeure happens, plan B, they can't. 2021, we can do it a little bit or we can't then they end up doing it a little bit. 2022, I'm sure it's all these same considerations. So it just props, not that I think anybody's watching, but props to the folks behind
Right.
Dragon Con, because I feel like they've had to perpetually live in an A and B world since 2020. But
Yeah.
while we're talking about kind of the ramp back since 2020, 2021, obviously, that was a very interesting year. Very minimal people, masks mandated everywhere, and vaccines and all that stuff.
Yep.
Last year was a little bit more in that kind of like sea of normalcy, but they eliminated a lot of the, requirements that we talked about, and the tickets online. That sounds like a change that's going to be permanent at this point. What do we
Yeah.
think may be different this year versus last year? Do you think there's anything else that's going to kind of dip into that normalcy world? Or do you think Dragon Con's kind of finding that new normal?
They're finding the new normal
Mhm.
because I can tell you that, being down here in Georgia, masks are not coming back. Even though you will find articles online saying that maybe we should because there's an uptick right now,
Yeah.
they're not going to mandate that at DragonCon.
Oh, and
They
that's true in California even. Like
yeah,
society has made that
yeah,
choice. And I realize that's a whole other YouTube, but that's the
yeah.
reality, right? Yeah.
So, but let's talk about some of the other stuff. Now, we've been talking a lot about the SAG after strike, but for many people that go to DragonCon, the celebrities are not a part of it. And so for them, it's not going to change. Like the last time I was in an actor panel, like a panel with actors talking about their TV show, was probably like 2004 or
Mm-hmm.
2005.
Mm-hmm.
And it was for Firefly. It was the Firefly actors before Serenity came out. And I think that's the last time I've been in the room for that. And I go through the celebrity petting zoo once to be like, oh, that's what that person looks like. Cool. And I just keep walking. So for a lot of people, like it's the strike's not even going to affect them because they don't go into that stuff. That's not why they're at DragonCon.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's 30 conventions in one, and the celebrities are only like in a couple of those conventions.
Yeah.
So
Totally fair.
but like the celebrity petting zoo, it'll be a little bit different because obviously, they can't sell headshots of themselves in costume. So there's going to be a few more, probably some more vetting going on, which is going to be on the celebrities. Their handler might have to screen some people because in order to make the celebrity not awkward, because they can't answer questions even there. And what is the celebrity willing to do? So those are kind of the two areas most that I can see kind of changing. But other than that, I'm expecting it to be kind of the same as last year,
Mm-hmm.
except with maybe even a smaller footprint because the America Smart buildings that are right by the hotels, they got new ownership in 2021
Mm.
and are not and have been slowly taking away the spaces that DragonCon uses and turning them into smaller areas.
Mm.
Like the area where they moved the board gaming to in like 2017, it was like this big open area, but it was right by all the hotels. Well, they actually took that big open area, put up a whole bunch of walls, and put offices in there, and so it doesn't exist anymore. And so the gamings had to move further away. And from what I understand, more and more of the America's Mart are being enclosed into smaller spaces.
Mm.
So it can't be used for things like this.
Interesting.
Because throughout the rest of the year, they don't have anything that they can do with those spaces. So the only time those big spaces are really useful is during DragonCon, and the new ownership's not exactly banking on that. Because that's probably why America's Mart had to get sold in the first place, is because they couldn't make that much money outside of the DragonCon stuff.
Right. And I think didn't I hear something about the board gaming isn't going to be 24/7? Well, not
It wasn't last.
in the
It
same
wasn't
space it
last
won't
year.
be. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
no, and
forgot.
it
Oh, I
wasn't
forgot about that.
because the America's Mart 3 they close.
Mm.
They now close from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. So there is an overflow room in the Westin Hotel,
Mm-hmm.
and that was there last year because I walked in there and there were like 3 people at tables playing games.
Mm.
But they always close that main area from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m.
And that was a big thing I remember you used to do, is go in the middle of the night to go do that. I think you told me you used to do werewolf. I think maybe
I
the
did.
first year I went was the first year you kind of said, I think I'm done with that.
Yeah, so for the longest time, gaming was in the basement of the Hilton, which is now panel rooms. They've enclosed that large space,
Right.
walled it off, and turned it into panel rooms.
Yeah.
And because that's better for the hotel long term than having that big open space downstairs.
And great for some of the tracks we're a part of, quite honestly.
Yes,
Yes.
it's great for that. But that took away that. But like you could go down there and you can bring a cooler and bring your own stuff and go down there and you can play board games or werewolf. And I played werewolf. It was kind of like right after werewolf kind of came on the scene in like the late 2000s. And what wound up happening is then DragonCon TV did a bumper about it, and all the drunks showed up
Oh
to go
no.
play werewolf, and that took all the social deduction out of it because they were like, "Oh, you're wearing a red shirt, you're gone first." And I'm like, the people of those of us who are trying, or my badge says Bobby Blackwolf, so obviously I'm the werewolf. I go the first round every single time, and they're like, "Well,
Oh
that shouldn't be your name
yeah.
if you don't want to go out and so I could never actually play the game anymore because nobody's playing the first round. They're just making jokes and usually
I may have contributed to that problem a little bit around 2014, 2015. I
Yeah,
definitely had a night of meeting some online friends, and we definitely voted out a few red shirts
yeah.
because we didn't know where else to start.
Yeah, and there is a way to start. It's just
I
when you're
know, I know.
drunk, you're
Yeah.
not thinking about it. But like that's when I say like every year is something different. Sometimes I used to stay up all night playing Werewolf and games like that, and then I don't do that. I did different things in later years, and that's the beauty of DragonCon. It's never the same experience 2 years in a row. But now like the America Smart, they don't let you bring in a cooler of anything because they sell drinks in on site, including beer, but when they close, you still can't bring a cooler in. You can't bring any outside food or beverage because the America's Smart people want that money. And so, like, a lot of my friends no longer go in the board gaming room either,
Mm,
even though they used to basically live in there.
yeah. Huh. Interesting how all that's changed. Let's talk a little bit about some of like the fan tracks and things.
Yep.
You're right. There's a large chunk of Dragon Con that really doesn't change. You brought up the space track, which is so funny because I keep saying every year that's the one track where I'm like, I really want to go see a panel on this track. And then I never get around to it just because of how busy I am with other stuff or, trying to
Mm-hmm.
check out the dealer hall or whatever it is. And then
Yeah.
this year, my spouse is going for the very first time. So it's going to be also kind of like showing him the ropes and all that stuff. So
Yep.
that's going to be very interesting. But I keep saying I want to get to the space track and do something over there. But
Mm-hmm.
is there any type of programming on some of the other tracks you're really excited to see, or something you hope to check out this year that maybe you haven't seen before?
I haven't really looked
Mm.
all that much. There it's I so far all I've really looked at are the two tracks that I'm really involved in
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
and looking at that. But like sometimes I'd look through and like there was some interesting stuff on the space track about like the micro satellites that anybody can put up. And I actually knew somebody who had put up a satellite, and it's these little cube satellites that go up. Like they release like 1,000 of them, and they're all like these little university projects. Or the EFF track is sometimes always interesting, and that's one that people
Mm.
don't think of. That's the Electronic Frontiers Foundation, and I've actually spoken on a panel on the EFF track before, and I've realized I am not paranoid enough to speak on the EFF track. But they've got some very interesting things. There's a lot of panels there about AI. They usually
Mm.
kind of go into that. There was stuff about crypto and NFTs before. I was on for a VR panel, is what I was actually on for a couple of years
Gotcha.
ago. Um,
So they were
and
talking about AI before everybody else was.
yes, and
Yeah.
so they've got a lot of AI panels, but it's also like how do you protect yourself online, privacy, things like that. And so there's always interesting stuff there. And so you just need to kind of go through and look around at things
Mhm.
and see what people are talking about and see if and a lot of times if they are fan discussions. The great thing about DragonCon panels that are different from most panels at other conventions is that DragonCon panels are designed to be more of a conversation,
Yeah.
especially if it's not a celebrity panel. It
Mm-hmm.
is designed to be a conversation
Mm-hmm.
between the panelists and the audience. Yes, the panelists have the mic, but the audience can be part of the conversation, and there can be back and forth during the panel more so than like strict Q&A. Come up to the microphone, ask your question, and sit down.
That is so true. And to transition a little bit to the two tracks that we know best that we've been fortunate enough to work with for the last few years, that would be the video gaming track as well as the digital media track. I know that, with the video gaming track, one panel that I've done in the past that I'm fortunate enough I get to do again this year is the diversity in video gaming track. But, when you only have, 4 or 5 panelists, I mean, you could have 12 panelists up there and you still are not going to
Yeah.
be able to represent, the diversity of, nerd and gaming culture and really demonstrate the fact that gaming is for everyone. So yeah, as the moderator, I really do try to structure that panel as like it's a conversation. We're here to talk about our perspectives, but we want to hear the audience, not just
Yeah.
questions, but perspectives from the audience as well, because quite frankly, folks in the crowd are going to have perspectives that people on the panel don't have. And
Yeah.
I thought at least, last year for sure, which I may have been 2 years ago was the first time I did that panel, but last year I remember was really good discussion. So I'm looking forward to being able to do that again for sure.
Yeah,
So.
and the neat thing about like the video game track is how they do Q&A, and they're going to be
Mm.
doing it again this year. Is that it's actually through an app,
Mm-hmm.
because that in 2021 they didn't want nobody wanted to pass around a microphone anymore, and so they did it via an app, and it worked really well. And the great thing about the panel that you're doing about the diversity, and I can say this because I'm not doing the panel and I'm not usually there, is that unfortunately there are some people that attend that diversity in video games is a bad thing. and they want to highlight how bad it is. And in terms of forced diversity and stuff like that. And as the moderator, you get to kind of weed those out so they're not part of the conversation,
Right.
which is probably not the way it would have worked in 2019 and earlier if we just passed around a mic.
Yeah. Which
And so I really like how they do it.
To the crowd's credit, I didn't see it. Now, granted, there's somebody else that sees the screen before I, like that while we're chatting, they could be coming on the screen. There's somebody else that has a magic button that can strike things off the screen before even I see them. So there could have been that, but the crowd was really good last year. So I can't, you know, and if anybody were, you know, I'd be looking around and somebody would catch my dagger eyes if I saw some, you know, people snickering or something like that. So you're trying to have a serious conversation about gaming is for everyone. It's a very simple phrase, very easy to say, but anyway. What are some of the other, kind of programming you're involved with on some of the tracks that we're working with, and what you're looking forward to, and some of the specific things that you're doing?
So I get to be on panels about AI, and I actually got in. I have been placed. I won't say invited because they didn't ask; they just placed me on it, which is great. I love it. But I am on the
That's a
independent
sign that
film
you've
track.
made it, though.
I know.
Yeah.
But I am on the I am on the independent film track for whatever reason to talk about AI. What is everybody so afraid of? And I looked, and the other people that are on the track, and I am not the moderator. I can see who the moderator is. It ain't me. So I'm not running this panel. But it's like, this is a director of independent films. This is a writer of independent films. It's all these people that work in independent films. And what probably happened is we, as attending professionals at DragonCon, we get our name in the program. We get a comped badge, one comped badge. And we have a long bio that all the track directors can see.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is they search for certain terms. And I have in my long bio that is not published, I talk about what I do at my day job. I talk about the software development. I talk that I've done VR. I even talk about the actual platform, the software as a service platform that I write on. So like that's actually in there, even though it's not visible to the public. So they probably found me from that, and they're like, oh, he's going to be the tech guy that's going to be pro AI and pro large language models. And so we can have a healthy debate. And I'm like, they don't know me. But I'm going to be able to go in there. Yeah, I'm going to be able to go in there and kind of be like, this is what the tech actually is. This is what it can do. This is what it can't do. But I personally am pessimistic about how society is going to use this technology.
Mm-hmm.
Because like individuals can be noble and use it for the right reasons, but can society as a whole?
Mm-hmm.
So
and the legal system too, with the recent, news we just had about the copyright, because that's huge.
Yeah.
So that's going to dominate the conversation too, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I'm excited to be on that. I am also on a digital media panel. I was invited on this one, but about AI and ChatGPT for podcasts, and talking about that stuff. And I'm probably one of the tech people that's on it, and everybody else is kind of using it for creative purposes. So I get to be on that panel. So I get to do some AI stuff. Usually I get to do VR stuff. This year it's AI.
Interesting.
And stuff. But I do get to interview and have a conversation with Steve Jackson on the video game track.
That's awesome.
And it's the Steve Jackson of the US-based Steve Jackson games. See, there's two Steve Jacksons in the board and card game world. There's a Steve Jackson here in the US who did Munchkin and GURPS and Illuminati and Zombie Dice and stuff like that. That's the one I'm talking to. There's a Steve Jackson in the UK that did like sorcery and some other like role-playing game type stuff. And it doesn't help that they've actually collaborated with each other and worked on each other's projects. So I'm not talking to the UK Steve Jackson. I'm talking to the US Steve Jackson about their video games of their board and card games. And playing, because they have a version of Munchkin, the card game, on Steam and on mobile devices, and talking about creating that, and some of the things that's next with Steve Jackson video games. And so I'm really excited about that because I do play a lot of board and card games, and I get to speak with Steve and as well as Irene, who heads up their Men in Black section division at Steve Jackson games. So I'm really excited about that. That's my quote unquote big panel. But they're all big. They're all great. But that's my like big name brand one.
I think due to reasons and things we've talked about earlier, I don't really have a big name panel this year, but like you said, I'm still very excited for some of these conversations because there's a lot of great things that can still grow from them. I think one interesting panel you and I are both on, because it's
Mhm.
something that our network had brought to the table last year, is being on streaming media when you're over 40 years old. It's the how
Yeah.
do you do, fellow kids? That
Yep.
particular panel. And what was interesting, and this is no secret, last year we had a little bit of the I don't want to say shadow, but just to make my point, I'll say like we kind of had that looming presence of you had these very large podcasters with a very large audience who
Huge.
were on that panel, and therefore the whole room was filled up with 98% their audience, which again, that is not a shade comment at all. I
Yeah.
love that they were there. They were very humble and in the trenches there
Yeah.
with us, and it was not an ego thing at all. So I want to make my point very
Yeah.
clear. I love that they were a part of that, but it's going to be interesting because this year we don't have that same star power, so to speak. So it's going
And
to,
we're in the overflow room. We're in the
yeah.
secondary room this
Wait,
year.
but at least this year both rooms are online, so it still doesn't
Yes.
really feel like the A room and the B room. Like I feel like it's equalizing a little more.
Yeah.
I'm very interested to see, like, is the audience going to be all people over 40? Or
Yeah.
getting close to that age. One, you talk about that, or are we going to still have kind of like a diversity in the crowd and age? I'm very curious to see what people kind of coming to that panel want to get out of it. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be interesting.
Lot of harsh realities and harsh truths
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
is what I'm going to be bringing to the panel, because this is one we pitched. I am moderating it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so we did it last year. It went really well. There were people that wanted to come for the panel content that couldn't get in because the
Because of,
fans
yeah,
of the guests basically lined up for an hour
yeah.
to get in.
But
So
if
there
you're
were
if
people.
you're their fans and you're like, you can see them in Galleria 6, which is
Yeah,
maybe a 70-person capacity, or I don't know these, I don't know, but
it's
it's
like 100.
yeah,
That
okay.
one's
So
100.
even then, that's like, but if you can get in a room, that's like seeing your favorite band performing at your local dive bar. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So like, I don't blame them at all for lining up and taking that chance.
yeah. And I will say the audience was very respectful of all of us. Yes, most of their
Yes,
questions were
yeah,
to
100%.
their faves, but they accepted the rest of us speaking.
Yeah, that's
It didn't seem like the hey, why are these other people talking when my heroes are here?
yeah. I did
So
not feel othered with the panelists, which was great. Again,
yeah,
that speaks very highly of them. But anyway, yeah.
yeah. So, but I am looking forward to doing that one again and doing it with some different people as well, because Kurt, VO by Kurt, who is great. Like we're talking like long gray hair, like
His
he's
voice,
been around, and
his
he's got the great
his boomy voice, yeah.
booming voice, and we've got a woman cosplayer.
Mm-hmm.
So she's going to be talking as well. I actually did have somebody who
Danny,
wanted to be on the
right?
panel.
She's really good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I wanted to. Somebody actually wanted to be on the panel. They're like, "I'm 39. That's close enough." And I'm like, "No, it's not."
Oh, I would have said yeah. I would. Bobby's harsh, but next year we'll have somebody built in, right? Yeah. So there is that.
Yeah.
Cool. And then let's see. Another panel I know I'm doing over on digital media is kind of about when is good enough. And this is going to be an interesting one because even this is one that even Bobby and I, even the two of us, have different perspectives on.
Yes.
You look at the Bobby Blackwolf show. He tapes it live here on Twitch and then edits a very polished production that takes out the ums and the ahs and all that. And I get why you do it because you're by yourself. So there are going to be ums and ahs and all that stuff. Whereas OLR, we predate podcasting, right? We're an old freaking show at this point. We've been around since 2002 before podcasting was a thing. So our show was designed in the nature of a satellite radio or even an old school AM radio 3-hour show about video games that it's live. We do it live. And what goes out, goes out. And it is very rare that I will edit. I only edit when something goes, like we get a call that goes places it shouldn't go, or just like somebody's accidentally does a doxing or something, like those are the only things I'll go back and edit. Otherwise I'm like, live is live. It is what it is. People want to see the train wrecks, so let's do it. So it's going to be interesting to kind of have those varying perspectives even in the room. there's nothing wrong with the way you're doing your show, Bobby, or any of these
Yeah.
other people on the panel are doing their polished edit show. But I hope they all have the same compassion for me, who says, no, sometimes the draw is I'm gonna write this one down. The draw is the raw. Hopefully nobody takes that to a weird place. But I think when it comes to the recording, that's what it is, right?
Yeah, and nobody took Neil before VOG into the wrong place when we debuted in 2012 and used that as our thing. Nobody took that to the wrong place either.
Okay, fair.
But I'm sad I couldn't be there for that, because that is actually directly on at the same time as my independent film panel.
Oh.
So I can't be in the audience to heckle. But no, that's a really good topic, because, like, there's also the phrase of "don't let perfect be the enemy of good."
Mm-hmm.
And when is it good enough? It doesn't always have to be perfect.
Right.
And some people want to make it perfect, which is why they never put anything out, because it's not perfect enough. And so there's a balance. Like, my opinion on that, and I'm not on the panel, is that there's a balance. Like, there's, you should do some, but you don't have to do all of it. And it's really based on whatever situation you're in. Like, you were at my house and we did a show together. I didn't edit anything. I lopped off the beginning and the end, and that was it.
Now you know that's how OLR's done every week.
Yes. But I can't do that because I am alone, and there are like 8-second pauses. And if you're driving in the car listening to my podcast, you don't want 8 seconds of audio to cut out.
No. Again, I totally understand why you do it. Yeah. So it's interesting. And then, but then there's, it's we have long form videos like this, and then we're looking at doing short form polished things too. So it is different schools of thought. So I think it's going to be a very good conversation. As the nice thing about digital media at DragonCon is that it pulls in a lot of people that are curious about starting a show, or like, they've talked about, we play D&D, we want to record it and put it out on the internet. What should we do with it? There's a lot of people exploring that, and I think that want to hear about these types of topics. So as always. And the one thing, and maybe this is a good topic, I do want to give a quick shout out though to digital media, because folks out there, you might be watching this because you want to go to DragonCon this year, but you can't, or you maybe follow us here at VOG, or whatever reason you're watching this, but you're not going to be able to go to Atlanta in person. I would encourage you to follow at least the digital media track has an online presence on Twitch. They're going to be streaming everything, and then on their YouTube, they're peppering stuff throughout the year too, which is great. So you can get a little taste of DragonCon there. So follow DC Digital Media, if I remember right. And
so it's DC Digital Media, and then DC Digital Media 2 is the other room.
Yep.
So the two of my panels are going to be on DC Digital Media 2, including our How Do You Do, Fellow Kids, and then the main room is DC Digital Media. So they're going to basically, and I don't want to commit them to it, just because you never know what happens. This is the first year they're going to have an internet drop in both rooms. This is actually the first year Digital Media Track has owned both rooms. The second room was originally an overflow room any track could get. It's just the Digital Media Track used it 99% of the time. I think the anime track had one panel in there last year.
Yeah.
So they have it now, which means they can put all their big stuff in there, put in the recording equipment, and they own it. And so I don't want to commit them, but that's their plan, is to have 2 Twitch streams going on the whole con of each room. And then they upload those Twitch feeds up to YouTube, so you'll get to see them year round.
Yeah. Well, I kind of thought maybe this is a good note to kind of end our discussion on, because especially with, digital media, and even the video game track always gets me pumped in this regard too. And I was lucky enough to work with horror last year, and it had me very enthused about some of the things I do with horror hosting and stuff. Admittedly, I don't stay on top of the current trends in horror, so I don't think there was a place for me this year, but I still love the track and all that. So hoping maybe next year there'll be a panel talking about movies from the 80s that I do go to screenings to over and over and over again, that type of thing. But my point is, from all of these tracks that I participate with, I know I always leave DragonCon very, very motivated. And so, what's that kind of sensation for you when you go to DragonCon and get to collaborate with all these other folks? How do you feel once you leave? It's like, oh, I gotta hit the ground creating.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I need to find something to stream. I need to find something to do and stuff. And it's always interesting as well, with Discord now, and the digital media track has the Discord. That Discord is hopping for a week or two after DragonCon, and everybody's talking, and then real life comes back, and it starts, being less and less active until January when panel submissions come in, then it's a little bit active, and then right around now everything's getting more and more active. So
But
it's
this year, I think it's been more consistent than years
yeah,
past. Like it's been as it's getting bigger and bigger, it's
yeah,
pretty regularly hopping throughout the year. Yeah.
yeah. And the regular DragonCon Discord's hopping all year round. That like we're apparently, according to them, we're in like day 700 something of DragonCon goes virtual because it just never stopped. And so
I'm very bad and I never check in there. But it's too much. I can't stand like
oh yeah,
if I'm gonna
I
commit to
muted
being
it.
on a Discord, I'm gonna commit to reading every message into Discord. Impossible on that server. Impossible.
No, I muted it.
Yeah.
I muted it, so I'm in there. But I can go in and look.
I'm there.
But
I'm just passed out in the closet.
yeah. I'm passed out in the corner of the old game room. That's in the old board game room. But because it was really cold down there, and it was really easy to fall asleep down there. But yeah, no, I feel motivated. It makes me want to do more. And then it's like, then real life comes in like, but you don't have time to do more right now. Maybe you can improve what you already do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, nah. When is that's I'm good enough.
When is good enough? Good enough.
Yes.
Well, maybe it ties to that too. But anyway,
Maybe.
but that's also why I'm really glad. Like, okay, we started giving a little CPR to the VODs and the YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
A few weeks before DragonCon this year.
This is weird. Usually this is the stuff we start doing like the week after we get
usually
back.
this is the thing. Rob or Bobby is like, oh no, because DragonCon, we got to do this thing. No, this year I'm planning ahead.
Yeah.
If we can do that roller coaster thing and get into the launch before DragonCon, then DragonCon's only going to get us into the stratosphere, which is going to be awesome. So hopefully make some connections and have some more guests for future discussions. So all right. Well, speaking of future discussions, we hope you will join us for future discussions, either on our Twitch channel over twitch.tv/VOGNetwork, VOG Network, or on our YouTube as well over at VOG Network. And of course, you can always find the latest and greatest at VOGNetwork.com. And you know what? You look for us on socials. VOG Network's a good place to look if you want to stay in touch with us. Super appreciate it. Bobby, I don't know if I think most people at the network here know you, but just in case, do you want to plug anything else? Your stuff at DragonCon or your show?
Yeah, I will, and I also kind of have a final thought.
Oh, please.
Or kind of a final thing to show that.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, like when I'm doing these when I'm talking or doing podcasts, I'm like fidgeting just below screen with something, and sometimes it's like a twist tie or something, and I'm kind of fidgeting. I found this. So a lot of people who who listen to my podcast know that my mother passed away last year, and I've been going through the old house, the old estate. We lived there. We moved there when I was 3 months old. And in the wet bar, I found, because my parents did like to drink, I found a bunch of drink stirrers from the 80s. And one of them is this, and it is the Polaris.
That's the restaurant on top of the Hyatt, isn't it?
It is the restaurant that is on top of the Hyatt.
Oh my gosh.
And which looks like a UFO. It used to be, at the time, that was the tallest building in Atlanta, was this UFO when the Hyatt was built. And so that's what I've been fiddling with, because I kept this drink stirrer because I'm like, that's DragonCon. I stay in that hotel. So I found this and threw away all the other drink stirrers because I didn't care about them. But this one, I'm like, this is cool. Like, this is like 80. This is from the 80s, most likely. So that was kind of my final thought on that, because I've been kind of sitting here just kind of like, twirling it around, which is typically what I do when I'm on the air. So when am I on the air? Well, I am on the air Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, here at the Voice of Geeks Network Twitch channel, twitch.tv/VOGNetwork. It is also a podcast. It's called The Bobby Blackwolf Show. I thought I was only going to do it 18 months or 18 weeks, maybe. And I've been doing it 18 years. So it's an AM radio style talk show about video games. I talk about video games, and the podcast is edited all the ums and uhs and the long pauses out, but not the content. The content doesn't change. So you can be here live, interact with the show. I try to read intelligent comments from chat, but this is Twitch, so that's a fun thing to try to do. And then it leads right into what Rob's about to talk about, what he does. But and I am on socials at Bobby Blackwolf. If you are where skies are blue, it's at BobbyBlackwolf.com, not psky.social. And also mstdn.games is the Mastodon instance I'm on, but I'm not posting as much on Mastodon anymore. So Rob, where can people find you?
Well, as you were mentioning there, Orange Lounge Radio comes on right after the Bobby Blackwolf Show, live Sunday nights here at the Voice Geeks Network. It's not just me, but it's also my pals that I stream with and have been streaming with for over 20 years at this point now, including Dark Sakura, a fantastic Dead by Daylight streamer here on the Twitch platform, and some other games too, some retro stuff as well. And then Loki, or Loki OLR, and that's where the OLR comes from, who's really exploding in the Minecraft content creation community this year. So good luck this weekend, Loki, by the way. Yeah, so the three of us get together and we talk about video games as well every Sunday night, and it's a lot of fun. We don't edit it, as I mentioned before, but that's all part of the fun. The live,
don't need to.
Exactly. We got the three of us to banter around, so it's good. So check that out, and of course, I'm on pretty much all the socials. Either Rob Roberts if you're on that blue skyish place, or Mr. Rob Roberts when some politician overseas or the guy that makes guns took my name. So check that out, Mr. Rob Roberts, if you need to, on like Instagram and Twixter and all that good stuff. Yep. So that's it. All right. Well, now we had the DragonCon 2023 preview. Stay tuned to the VOG Network channels for hopefully some things from DragonCon. We'll be able to do some little bits here and there, and then the mandatory, it's coming, DragonCon 2023 post show after DragonCon. All right. Thanks so much for watching, everybody out there. Really appreciate you all. Have a fantastic week. And for some of you, we will see you in Atlanta Labor Day weekend. Until then, take care.
Take care.